Very good. Okay. Hello and welcome to East Carolina University for yet another edition of Pirate Parents Live, broadcast live here on Facebook, or you're watching the archived edition. We hope you'll get some great information in the next 30 minutes or so. We're here today to talk about mental health and wellness. We have a great panel that is here today. We've got a variety of folks from students to staff members dealing in all capacities and see just about everything on a college campus that relates to mental health and wellness. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to introduce you to the panel, and then we're going to go with some questions. So we're going to start off right here on this side. We have Troy Nance. He is probably one of the most engaged students I've ever met. I'm not sure he actually goes to class. He's in the Residence Hall Association, president, right?
Yes.
Of RHA. He's in the Elite Pirates Student Government Association, and he is also one of the students that work with the Shoes Project. And we'll hear from Troy about the Shoes Project here coming up. We've also got, to his left, we have Dr. Valerie Kistler Van Reed. She is a licensed psychologist and the director of the ECU Center for Counseling and Student Development. To her left, we have Lauren Thorne. She's the interim associate dean and the dean of students office and has been with the university for 6 years. And then on the end, definitely last but not least, is Ainsley Worrell. Ainsley is the senior assistant director for wellness promotion, and in the last 2.5 years has been at ECU. He's responsible for the day-to-day operation of Student Rec Center and the Health Sciences Student Center and the Wellness Center office, planning and facilitation of wellness-related programs. All right, so we're going to jump right on in question-wise. The first question, mental health is very broadly defined in today's society. Pretty much everybody wants to throw an umbrella, good, bad, or indifferent, with mental health. From each of your perspectives, and we'll start with you, Troy, as a student, what does mental health and wellness mean from you as a student, and then we'll just go right on down the line.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing with mental health is just making sure that people know that one is it's okay to have a mental health issue, it's okay to have a mental health problem. Statistic prove, which somebody else would probably get to, because I am only a student, so I don't know everything. But it's probably about 1 in every 2 students, about half of students on a college campus do suffer with some sort of mental health issue or problem. And from a student perspective, working in the campus living, Residence Hall Association, and as a resident advisor last year, just really knowing that you can engage with your fellow students. I try to make sure with my residents I was always asking how's it going, not only on a class level or how's your classes or tests going, but pretty much how are you doing individually, how are you doing personally, because you really don't know. And I was able to encounter a couple different issues over the course of my 10 years in RA, and just to make sure that I do know what's going on with my residents, and just making sure every other student knows you can talk about it with other people. So that's probably the biggest thing.
Great. Alex?
From our perspective in the counseling center, we would approach it from probably 3 different angles. We would look at safety issues first, trying to make sure that students are not in danger of hurting themselves or someone else. Beyond that, we would work with them on coping with the concerns that they have. We know that students who come to us are most frequently dealing with anxiety issues and depression, so we would make sure that they have the coping skills they need to address those concerns. And then beyond that, we would want them to be able to have healthier lives, so we would be working with them on developing maybe healthier relationships and just enjoying their lives more overall.
Laura?
I think it comes down a lot to balance. From the Dean of Students perspective, we acknowledge that students have a lot on their plate. They're usually trying to balance numerous stressors, responsibilities, things that they feel obligated to do as a student. And so our office a lot of times is about acknowledging all of those different things that they're learning to juggle, and then helping them to get connected with the appropriate resources, and hopefully encouraging them to reach out and, like Troy said, let people know how they're really doing. Not just glossing over it, not just pushing it down until it becomes a bigger problem, but really being able to address an issue before it becomes sort of that critical tipping point, and knowing that there are people and places on campus that want to listen and help and assess and get them connected to the appropriate services. So for me, it's all about knowing that it's not about cutting things out of your life, and it's not about pretending that that stressor's not there. It's about acknowledging it, and then making room and accommodating and, as Valerie said, coping with those things so that we can have a healthy balance of all the things in our lives.
And from Campus Rec and Wellness, especially in the wellness area, we focus on 8 dimensions of wellness. So Lauren actually threw out the term balance, and that's something that we really try to focus on. We're oftentimes seen as a resource on campus that's the fun resource, right? So that's where students come into play, which is a huge resource for students who are maybe feeling anxiety or stress that's associated with their academics or maybe some sort of a social experience that they're going through. So in terms of the 8 dimensions of wellness, we try to focus on mental health from a preventative side. So we really try to focus on programs that widen the scope and providing educational opportunities so that students can understand who they are from a self-assessment perspective, knowing where they are, knowing that they can come to Campus Rec and Wellness as a soft place to land, and then we try to, in a sense, connect them with the resources that are on campus. So just that balance piece is a message that we always promote to students from a wellness, mental health perspective, and then connecting them with the appropriate resources is what we try to do in the end.
So for our parents and families that are watching live on Facebook, feel free. We've got a comment section. You can pose questions, and we'll see those questions coming in. We'll ask them to the panel for you if you have a certain comment. We'll try to include that in there as well. If you're watching the archived edition, you can go ahead and post comments, and we'll have our folks in the Office of Parent Family Programs will also be responding even on the archived edition. So feel free to make this as interactive as possible. One of the questions that did come up in advance, and I'll pose this to any and all of you because you have different perspectives, is why is there still a stigma in today's society that exists for people to get help? We'll start with you, Ainsley, and we'll go back the other way.
Sure. So obviously, when we look at mental health and the issues that are associated with it, there are some consistent sources over history that folks struggle with mental health. But then also, as you look at generationally, there are other aspects as well. And I'm sure Lauren and Valerie can talk a little bit more about that. But as you look at mental health within that 14 years old to 35 age range group, there are a number of conduits for mental health issues, right? And when you talk about stigma, you're talking about that the folks in that age range where they're still somewhat impressionable. We talk about college students. So culturally, from a cultural perspective, to have a mental health issue is not something that we culturally necessarily value, right? We know that it's normal, but if someone discloses that they're struggling with that, then they're looked at as less. And it's tough for college students because they come to campus because a part of their experience on campus is trying to find themselves, trying to find that identity. So how do I make that a part of my identity when I know my peers are going to look at me poorly for having that issue?
Lauren?
I think a lot of it comes down to our fear of how other people are going to respond. It's not even that we are necessarily scared to own a diagnosis or a mental health concern, but it's more of, but is that going to change the way that someone else looks at me? So it's not even about the personalizing of the issue. It's more of the, am I going to be excluded, or are my peers going to look at me differently because I do feel comfortable sharing this? I think that there's a great opportunity with this generation of students coming through. I like to call this is kind of the generation where a lot of adolescents and from middle school on up became very comfortable with a lot of their diagnoses. This is kind of when we started getting ADHD medication at lunch in middle school, or parents became more comfortable seeking out counseling services for their students when they noticed that they were struggling. And so we're seeing, at least in the Dean of Students office, and I know in counseling, we do have some students who are coming through and they say, this is my diagnosis, this is what I need in order to be healthy, this is what I'm looking for from the university. So I think that there is an opportunity to both encourage that and kind of help students learn how to tailor that they can own it and also show that they can be successful. And then I think there's also an opportunity to teach the student body at large, how do I respond to this? If someone comes up to me and discloses a mental health diagnosis, am I going to shy away and cringe back, or am I going to say, okay, cool, tell me about that, and be able to embrace it in a way that hopefully will have them feel more comfortable and more at ease to support their peers and their fellow pirates moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, and I would agree with Lauren that things have changed, and that's something that's very positive. I've been on campus for 20 years, and that is definitely something that I've seen change. So while we have seen the number of students seeking help go up, we have also seen the comfort, I think, that students have when they come into the counseling center change too. And so many of them, more of them, have been in treatment or in counseling or have sought help in the past before they've gotten to us. And so I do think that there is increased comfort with seeing that there's an issue, saying that they've been in counseling before, their friends may know, and encouraging their friends to get help too. And so I think that's something that's really positive, that's a real change. And so I do think Lauren is right in saying that we need to be mindful when somebody comes to us about how we respond to that those messages are really important. And that doesn't, that isn't limited to just friends on campus. That does also extend to faculty, that extends to parents, that the way that we respond is huge. And that means that they may not come back to us if we kind of, as you said, kind of shrink back from that, or we say, I totally understand. I think, we hear a lot of faculty who will say, I hear what's going on with you. That's something that's happened in my own family, and I get that. I'll do what I can to work with you. And so we have a lot of allies, you would say, on campus as well. And so those messages being received well in family is really important too.
Troy, I'm going to reframe this for you as a student. What do you hear from your fellow students, male and female, about getting help? Even if it's going to a tutoring center, that whole concept of getting help sometimes gets, I can't because that says that something's wrong with me if I ask for help. What are you hearing and seeing in the halls?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess the first perspective of students is really, they came to college to kind of get that newfound freedom, away from their families, away from their parents, to kind of say, I can do this on my own now. Mm-hmm. And when they're reaching out to these resources that ECU definitely has here, but when they reach out to them, it's like, well, I thought I could do it on my own, but now I'm having to reach out for help. And it's just, they feel like they're going backwards. They're like, I've gotten college, I'm in a 4-year university, I'm here to make a difference, I'm here to be impactful, but now I'm having to ask for help along the way. Am I really doing this on my own? And I guess that's what I'm really hearing, because like you said, it does go from tutoring, it does go from the counseling service, dean of students, everywhere. It's like, if I'm reaching out, am I really, being successful? I'm really growing up. So that's the big perspective. And it's something to also add on for Patricia or Valerie and Lauren. First year students specifically, if you live in the residence halls, your college roommate, your first roommate that you have in the residence hall with you, is probably going to be the best person that's going to know everything about you. You're not going to share things with a random person in your class or a random person next to you. You're going to share things with your first college roommate. So I would really encourage parents, just reach out to your students if they live in the residence halls, to listen to their roommates. Just kind of say, hey, is there any signs that you're seeing? Are they not going to class? Are they just kind of depressed all the time? Are they not eating? And just report those to your resident advisor. That's the only way we'll know what's going on in those individual rooms. Because there are locked doors, and it's like behind closed doors, we don't know what happens. But the roommate does know firsthand what happens. So.
And that's a great segue into my next question. This is for anybody that wants to jump into this. So if I'm a parent or family member watching today, and we're now in late October, we've already had fall break, Thanksgiving's coming up, Christmas is coming up, holiday break's coming up. There's going to be some touch points where parents are starting to see their students come home. For first-year parents in particular, but maybe in parents in general, what are some of the things that parents and family members should be looking for as maybe a sign or a symptom that something may be not right?
Well, I think just like he was saying, I think that some of the concerns would be whether somebody's been going to class or not. And how you find that out can be pretty tricky. And so some of that information you would ask for, and it may not be that it's forthcoming, right? And so I think it's really important. You're going to start with checking in with your student about how things are going. I think that for first-year students, the most important, I see one of their most important jobs is adjusting. And so there are so many things that have to happen in this first semester, so many things that have to be figured out. And so checking in with all of those things in terms of how are they managing finances, social, laundry, all of those different, the roommate situation, all of those different pieces. And hopefully they'll be forthcoming with some of that stuff and just being understanding of where they are. And grades will be a piece of that, maybe not the most important piece in that first semester, because their emotional well-being is the most important piece. And once all of those other pieces are figured out, the academics will fall into place. And I know that's sometimes hard for parents to hear when some of these academic programs are so rigorous, but if they're not doing well emotionally, nothing else is really gonna matter.
Right.
And that's why we're here today. So starting with them, trying to figure out how they're doing, where, if they're going to class, all of those pieces, and if they're not willing to share, then you may have to get more creative in getting information. Maybe that's where you come in.
Yeah, so that's a good segue. So part of the Dean of Students Office is that we do offer services supporting parents and other concerned family members and friends. One of those ways is ECU Cares, which is accessible both online and over the phone. Online, you can find a link from our website, ecu.edu/DOS, and then you can also go through the phone line, which is 252-737-5555. Online, you can submit the information anonymously and make a report online to share information of concern, and then you can also call and leave a message if someone does not answer on the phone line, and that is a 24/7 service. And so we do have ways of being able to communicate with professors that don't have the same confidentiality and liability concerns of someone sort of from the counseling center. You know, a lot of times we'll get in connection with Campus Living, we'll talk with advisors, we'll really just be able to sort of do a good overview and make sure that a student gets connected to the appropriate resources and able to be safe. The big thing I would add was some of those conversations that happen over the breaks and when students start coming home. Don't be afraid to normalize the challenges. I think a lot of times parents are very quick to jump to everything's going good, right? You know, we look for those positive, affirming responses. And so a student who's coming in saying, you know, I don't think my major is right, I'm really struggling with my roommate, I'm having trouble with this, you know, it's hard to open up and share that with parents who are hoping that everything's smooth sailing. So being able to ask, you know, what's been the biggest challenge for you? What do you think has been the hardest part of college so far? Being able to open up questions with, you know, this must have been a really difficult time for you, and being able to affirm and normalize those experiences are a big piece of what we've seen with students who then are like really feel free to say, yes, I am struggling, I am having a hard time, and feeling comfortable actually sharing that information with their support network.
And I guess what I would share in listening to you say that is I am picturing how hard and scary those conversations are as a parent
Yes.
to know that those answers may come that you don't want to hear. Right?
Yes.
And so they're important conversations to have, but they're really scary and hard too, and I get that, but it's important to be able to get at that truth.
Right, especially when you're far away. You know, some of the phone calls that I've answered from ECU Cares, you know, a parent saying, it's just really hard, I want to be there with my student, and they're sharing and opening up that they're having a hard time and I can't fix it. And I said, I know, it's so hard, isn't it? And I said, the good thing is we are here, we want to help. We will let you know when we need you here, if we need you here, you know, and really just a lot of, you know, allowing those processes to happen. And so it is incredibly scary, and it puts both the students and the parents in a vulnerable position, and I think that that's really intimidating. But then once that hard conversation has happened, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid, and all of a sudden we know what's going on, and we can assess and provide the right kind of treatment and services that hopefully are going to help to begin the healing and kind of that developmental process that needs to happen.
So we've put the link is in the comments section to ECU Cares for the website, and then the phone number will also add down there, the 737-5555, if you have questions or want to follow up with that. So I want to kind of switch. Ainsley, you talked about 8 dimensions of wellness. It's not one of the 8 per se, but I think it goes into this, and then maybe Troy can follow up too. How important, as weird as it sounds, does failure fit into wellness? For somebody to be able to struggle and then deal with that failure, whatever it may be. Some of our students may have gotten straight A's in high school, and they get that first C on that first test, and to them, that is eternal failure, right? But how important is failure to wellness in general?
I think in many other examples, like wellness, failure is critical. I think it was Valerie and Lauren mentioned as well, talking about coping skills. A lot of the students that we've seen that come through our department, whether they're students who participate in our events or they're student employees, have talked to us about experiences where they've had in either an academic setting or in a personal setting, say it's a relationship that just didn't work out. It becomes a part of the journey in terms of developing an idea about who you are, and also the capacity for you to weather the storm per se. I supervise about 13 students that go out and conduct programs on campus on various topics, wellness related. And I always say to them that life continues to get tough, but what matters is how many tools do you have in your tool bag, right? Do you develop the capacity to manage these situations? So failure is very important now. It really matters what we do when we know that we failed. When we see the C and we know we're really in there, we wanted to get that A. What do you do after that fact? And I think that's, in essence, that's what my colleagues are talking about, is really getting those students connected to those resources so they can have those conversations about, okay, this was my aspiration, I fell short of that, now what do I do? Now how do I move on and become a better person and more apt to deal with difficult situations by developing my coping skills?
So Troy, this generation has been accused of being part of Trophy Nation, right? Every team, you play on a team and everybody gets that participation trophy, and it takes away some of that ability to struggle or not do well. As a student, you've become very successful as a student, but you get to work with students every day. What are their biggest trip-ups and struggles when it comes to failure or not being resilient?
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, the trophy generation, things are not given out in college. And parents, if your students haven't realized that yet, they surely will. You have to pretty much earn and work for everything that you're going to get. And students at first do come on campus. They're like, oh, I can do the same thing I did in high school and still do well. Well, that's not really the case. And then kind of dealing with Ainsley just said, how did we deal with those students that come to that realization halfway through the semester? We're like, oh my gosh, I have a C in this class. I'm not going to make an A. This is the first time ever. And so it's just really starting to have those conversations and talking about those students who are doing well, reaching out to a group in the class that constantly get A's on the test and say, hey, bud, how do you get an A in the class? Help me out, And obviously going to the tutoring center would help as well, but just asking your other students for it. And just know that one bad grade won't hurt you. That's just our message out that as a student leader on campus, when I do see somebody struggling with a bad grade or whatever's going on, bad relationship, this one thing is not going to hurt you. You have 4 years to kind of make it your own. Kind of at the end of the day, when you have that degree and you walk across that stage, what are you going to say that you look back and did? Did you remember that one C that first year, or that one bad relationship that you had, or you can remember all the great times that you had, and kind of who helped you along the way, and just finding that close-knit group of people that you can kind of go to, whether that be faculty, staff, or definitely your peers.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, and some things I want to get to as far as some programs that are coming up even this week in Campus Rec and coming up in the spring out of the entire campus-wide with the Shoes Project. But I do want to touch on, because I think it's important for whoever feels they want to jump in, the role of social media on our college students can have such a negative impact on their mental health. This generation in particular, all of them have a phone, all of them are connected to multiple Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, they're all connected. Talk about how social media in general can impact your mental health, or how can we better empower our students to be ready to handle social media in today's generation? I got you with another good question.
I mean, it's complex, and I think even as staff members, we struggle with it because we know that's where students are, and so we program and advertise and try to reach them through social media, but then we're also encouraging them, know when to put down the phone, when to turn it off, put it in airplane mode, take a break, come back to it, that kind of thing. I think the challenge is that students, these are students who have had a social media presence pretty much since middle school, and so many of us remember growing up without having that sort of magnifying lens on our decisions and how we matured and developed. And unfortunately, this is you can track them from 12 years old on up almost. It's interesting to see how it changes the way that they interact with one another. I think that we're seeing a lot of students struggling with initiating social interactions. It's a lot easier to text someone and have a long chat, through text conversations than it is to go up and, put your hand out for a handshake and speak face to face. So I think it's about, and I'm gonna go back, I think it's about balance. I think it's knowing that social media is wonderful and it's an excellent tool that we can use to connect with people and maintain relationships around the country and around the world, but it's also something that we have to recognize when we start to overuse it and over-rely on it to the point where we feel like we can't have a genuine interaction with someone because we are fearful of how it might be portrayed on social media. And I think just knowing when to put the phone down. You know, I ended up ordering a sticker for my door that says, you know, do more of what makes you forget to check your phone. Find those things that help you to disconnect and to enjoy being present rather than always, you know, looking down. And so sometimes just, you know, trying to be mindful, putting in some headphones and walking across campus and looking at people in the face, you know. Don't feel like you always have to be looking down, texting or doing things like that, but really try and just be mindful of what's going on in your environment around you and enjoying it.
Yeah, and I think I really struggle with that because I do think Lauren's right. We have to accept that that is the new reality. But the other piece of it is that you really do try to help students figure out how to separate the experiences that they're having versus the experience I'm having filtered through how will I post this on social media, right? Like what is actually reality? And that is something that is very complicated. How do you keep things in perspective? Like what do interactions really mean? And I think those are some of the conversations I'm having in my office with students about what is the meaning of those interactions and what do they want them to mean. And so some of these things are very philosophical in nature, but what we come down to is you can't just really unhook, right? And
Right.
say, well, I'm not going to participate because that's really not something that is an option for them. And I think that's in some ways unfortunate, but that is where we are. And so like you said, trying to keep it in perspective, trying to have some balance. And I do think it's important to look at those genuine relationships and connecting with others.
Troy, for you, without being specific, have you seen where social media has really just derailed folks in the halls?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all know what people post on social media. You know, we can go into a whole nother topic about bullying, hazing.
Yes.
But on the flip side of it, of the person, they're using social media as a way to reach out for help. And you know, most of the time, normally staff and faculty are not monitoring the social media of the students. It's students looking at other students' social media. So if I see something on Facebook, if I see something on Twitter go through that's not necessarily positive, they're saying, oh, today's just been terrible, or like it's not even worth the rest of the week or whatever. That is the job of the students to kind of go and look out for their friend and say, hey, I saw you posted this. It's great. I'm glad for you to share it and get it out in the open, but what's really going on?
Right.
So it's like there is an advantage to social media of getting it out there. They're asking for help, but it's up to the individual students who are following, who are monitoring, and say kind of, hey, I saw you did this. Like, how can I help? Like, what's the next step for this? So that's kind of my point on that.
So we've got a couple of programs coming up. One this week I mentioned is the Fresh Check Day, and it's kind of the topic that not everybody wants to talk about. But if we don't talk about it, nothing ever gets done about it. That we have serious mental health issues on campuses, on every campus, not ECU specific. We have students that are pondering suicide. We have students that are thinking about hurting themselves. We don't want to talk about it, but we have to talk about it. Fresh Check Day in Campus Rec and Wellness and other departments this Thursday. Ainsley, that's big time coming out of your area. Talk a little bit about that, and for parents that may be watching or family members and they want to encourage their students to get involved, how do they do that?
Well, I have the information. Fresh Check Day is really a massive collaborative effort, not only from Campus Rec and Wellness, but from Campus Living, from counseling, and a number of other departments. And the effort is really to get students out in the afternoon to connect with each other, specifically to promote a culture of having a discussion about mental health and especially suicidality. Through that program, we really want students to recognize those warning signs and then know the resources that exist not only on the ECU campus but also in the general community so that they can get help. The program will be from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. this Thursday. We're really hoping for good weather and hoping that a lot of students will come out and interact what I love about this program is that it's a huge part of it is student run. So while my colleagues and I from a planning aspect have some hands in it, a lot of the students will be out there facilitating the booths and engaging with their peers. And through that, we're really trying to promote not only awareness, but also really building a culture where students feel as if they have a good handle on what those situations may look like from a mental well-being perspective, and they can support each other through it.
And so this is an initiative that comes out of the Jordan Porco Foundation, which is the parents of Jordan when he committed suicide several years back, that this was intended to help others. And at TCU, correct me if I'm wrong, won the Outstanding Campus Award
Yes.
in just our first year last year. So this is year 2 coming up. We're excited about that. That'll then segue as we kind of wrap up the fall into the spring, and we go down the road to you, Troy, and Campus Living, and again, counseling and DOS and others are a part of this. The Shoes Project is now going into its 3rd year of existence, won National Program of the Year. Talk a little bit about Shoes and again, how students and families can get connected.
Yeah, definitely. So the 3rd annual Shoes event is February 8th, 2018. That's going to be on a Thursday. And pretty much we set up in the heart of campus over the mall area. And we're just able to, when we have a very large chalkboard out there, just kind of saying why you're so worth loving, and it's kind of student engagement that way. We play positive music to bring students in. We have food provided there for students as well. And then we have a multitude of resources. So very similar to Fresh Tech Day. But the kind of the highlight of why it's called Shoes is called Students Honoring Others' Everyday Struggles and Stories. And pretty much we've gotten over the past 3 years students and faculty and staff to donate their old shoes that they don't want anymore. And then we go out into the community and we get people to write down personal stories of someone that they know or maybe themselves who have mental health struggles, and they write it down and then we type it up, laminate it, and we attach them to a pair of shoes. So somebody who's a dancer going through struggles, whatever they're doing in their theater classes, we attach it to a pair of ballet shoes, or an athlete to tennis shoes. And we just kind of make sure we put the story to the shoe, and then we put those all over campus on the mall area, just to serve as a way that people every day, you don't know what they're wearing, what the type of shoes they're wearing, they're going through the same struggles as we are. And just kind of bring an initiative as well.
And so that's the positive side. You try to get them to connect, to tell stories, to realize maybe what somebody's going through, you're not alone in that component. For those of you parents and families that have been, when you came either for a tour or orientation or dropping your kids off and you see them all, to see them all surrounded by shoes with messages, to see yard signs up with statistics and information, it's really, really impressive. We hope our students get connected. So as we get ready to wrap up here, I want to start with Ainsley and we'll work our way back down to Troy in about 30 seconds. For our parents and families watching, what kind of advice, either resources, information, but kind of as a parting piece of knowledge from you, what would you share?
I think I'll go back to something that Lauren said that made me really think about this. Just from a parental side, is really providing a soft place for your son or daughter to land, and listening, and then reaffirming, making sure that they know that you're listening. And Lauren pointed out we have ECU Cares. If you really feel like you're concerned about your son or daughter, there are loads of touch points. ECU Cares is a perfect one for you to reach out and get some support. But provide just listening and reaffirming and showing them that you are listening.
I would say trust the process. It's not going to happen or change overnight. The beginning point looks a lot different than the end point, and there are going to be a lot of ups and downs over the way. So just know and normalize that and talk about it, and really allow your student to develop those independent skills and certainly to make those decisions, but then also be informed yourself. Know things that are available on campus, utilize those resources, direct your son or daughter towards those resources as appropriate, and just trust the process. There are many of us who have been able to watch students really transform from very anxious, very disengaged, very, just questioning everything, to these very confident young adults ready to go out into the world and figure out what that next step is. And there are a lot of ways that can go, and there's a process there for a reason. So,
Albert.
And I would say to trust your instincts. If you are concerned about your student and believe that they may be in crisis, to go ahead and make that referral. We have crisis hours every day at the counseling center from 11 to 4. We would meet with them, assess what their situation is, what their crisis is, and set them up with follow-up services. We are very busy right now at this time of year, but we do have crisis services available every day. We can also consult with you on the phone if you have a crisis that you want to talk about, and just get some information over the phone.
Yeah, definitely. And I just have 2 final points. One of the biggest people that they should reach out to your students, is, especially if they live in the residence halls, is the resident advisor. They know all the resources available, they can get them to the right person. And even if they don't live on campus, just have them talk to their suite mates, talk to their roommates, or just anyone that they can, because there's bound one person at least is going to know where to direct those resources to. Just get them talking to their other students. And then finally, I really encourage students always get involved. Whatever they're doing, find that niche, find their purpose, what they want to do on campus at ECU, and then their life gets a whole lot better, what I've seen. So.
Ainsley, Lauren, Valerie, Troy, thank you all so very much. I think the takeaway is a struggle is to be expected, but also overcoming and being resilient is what we're all here for, is to help our students and your students get through this. So thank you for joining us for today's edition of Pirate Parents Live. Have a great day.